Thank you for coming. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Women's Business Center. We're a nonprofit business center serving entrepreneurs in SLO, Kern, and Monterey counties. This webinar is being sponsored by the SBA, Wells Fargo Bank, Pacific Premier Bank, and the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Their generosity allows us to offer this webinar and our free mentoring services to you at no charge. Thank you, sponsors. So I wanted to let you know a little bit about who we are, and our video says it best. So I'm just going to play that for you. Let me screen share. All right, it's a 90-second video.
As an entrepreneur, I can tell you, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't because of the Women Business Center.
We're getting all of these wonderful services, whether they're classes, courses, virtual workshops, one-on-one consulting and mentoring for free. It's invaluable.
The consultants at the Women's Business Center are just amazing people, very caring people too, I've noticed. They all seem to be really empathetic and really kind, and they're really professional, like they're actually doing these things in their own lives and they're making a living at it.
The Women's Business Center was really important for us when we were trying to make a decision on whether to relocate to the Central Coast. Coming to a small area like this, we didn't know if we would have professional resources or connections available. So we utilized the services of the Women's Business Center to help us learn about the community.
If I have any questions, if I have doubts, opening a business is not easy, but if you have the right support and the right consultant who's gonna be there with you, then there is no fear because they are there for you.
Who has that, like, how lucky am I to have that opportunity to have so much help given to me and so many people that want me to succeed, and they're all really nice to me too. I love that place.
All right, she is so cute. All right, so I wanted to introduce our speaker today. I'd like to thank Brian Burgess for presenting. Brian is a CPA and earned a Master's of Accountancy and Taxation from Cal Poly. In his 10 years of business experience, he spent time in the accounting, education, printing, apparel, and construction industries, including 5 years as the CFO for a small but long-established printing business. Brian joined MCSC as a consultant in 2021. He's here today because he has a passion for helping others and a knack for teaching people who are learning new skills. You are in for a treat today. Brian has set up a lot of time for questions for you, and he's a consultant, which means that if you want to work with him for free through MCSC, you can do that as well. So before we get started, I just wanted to remind you to limit your distractions and mute your phone. Your webcams and your microphones are off. We'll be taking questions in the chat box. You're welcome to type them in as soon as they come to you. We'll be stopping for questions regularly. And of course, this is being recorded, and I will send you the link as always. We have a quick poll. If you could take 30 seconds to let us know how you heard about us, how you heard about this webinar, that would be great. All right, thank you, Brian. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody. I'm Brian, and I'll be teaching you a bit about Excel today. Couple things before I get started here. The goal of this presentation is to teach you how to use Excel as a tool, but not necessarily how to apply it to your business. If you need help doing that, you can always set up individual sessions with me. I may move a little fast for people. If that's the case, go ahead and just ask to slow down in the chat. If there's a couple of people that ask to slow down, Barbara will let me know and I will slow down a bit. There's a few sections we're going to go through tonight. The first section is the longest and the most important. And then there'll be a second section. If there's time, we'll get to the third section, but I'm not necessarily expecting that. At the end of each section, I'll go through all the questions during that section that haven't been answered yet. Barbara sent out all the spreadsheets that I'm going to use as part of my demonstration. So if you want to do it yourself as I'm doing it, you can follow along by opening those spreadsheets and trying to do what I'm doing on camera. I also, with all of that, was a functions list which I'm going to put on the screen real quick just to show you what that is. I'm not going to present on this, but I thought it was a useful tool. It just has a list of a bunch of different functions categorized by the kind of function that it is. You can see there's 10 pages of functions, so there's a lot. I would just use this as a reference tool. This is also older. It's for Excel 2010. They should all still work. There's probably more, and in some cases, better options than what's listed here. But for any sort of basic functions, they should be in this list. All right, so I'm going to get started here. I'm going to open up the first spreadsheet. It's the one called Excel Training 1 for anybody who's following along. All right, so I'm going to start very basic and work my way up. I'll start with basic movement in Excel. So if you have selected a cell, in this case, I've selected A2, you can move one cell to the right by hitting Tab. You can move one cell to the left by holding Shift and hitting Tab. You can move one cell down by hitting Enter and one cell up by hitting Shift Enter. You don't have to use keys. You can click on cells, but a lot of times it's easier to use keyboards shortcuts instead of a mouse. You can also hold and select multiple cells. So if I click and I'm holding down the click button and drag, you can see that I've highlighted a bunch of cells all at once. If I select a box here or a cell, you can see the box around it, and there's this little fill box down at the bottom. Maybe a little hard to see, but it's the zoom in here. The little green square at the bottom of the box. If you grab that, this is called the fill box, and you can drag it to do various things, which we'll talk about later. Undo, which you just saw me do. Let me do that. Undo takes away your last command. There's a shortcut for it up here by default, although you can remove it. You can also, I believe you can right click and undo. No, maybe not. And then what I normally do is Control Z, which is the keyboard shortcut command for undo. You can also redo, which is right here, Control Y, or you can click the redo button. Cell names I mentioned here. Right now I'm in cell A2 because I'm in column A and row 2. You can highlight a whole column. Columns are the cells going down. The columns are all letters. And if you get far enough that you finish the alphabet, you'll see that it starts going to an extra alphabet. AA, AB, AC, etc. And then the numbers go down as far as you need them, and those are the rows. So if you have selected a cell, the cell name is column row. So in this case, B2. You can change the size of a cell by selecting either the row or column that you want to change the size of. If you have it in the middle of the cell, you see that it highlights and gives me a little down arrow or a little right arrow if I'm on a row. But if I go right to the edge of it, it turns into an arrow going back and forth. Same here. If I click and drag, I can make it wider or shorter. If you make it too narrow for the data that's in there, you might get this pound signs or hashtags. That just means there's data here, but it can't display because there's not enough room. So if I make it bigger, you'll see now it can display. There's also a, I guess, a shortcut to auto size your either column or row to the size of the smallest size needed to fit all of the data in all of the cells. To do that, you go over to the side, just like you were going to drag it, and then you double click. And so now it's made it the smallest it needs to be to fit all of the data. You can also copy or cut and paste. So copy is Control C. I believe I can remember where I never actually used the menu here, but there's a cut option somewhere, and you can add it to that quick access toolbar, which we'll be going through later. But
Just to the left of where you are, Brian, next to Calibri, on the left, you have cut and copy.
There you go. Thank you. So there's cut and copy. Cut and copy operate the same way, except that copy makes a copy of it. And when you paste it, it leaves the original data. Cut removes the original data and moves it to where you paste it. So if I do Control C, you'll see that these sort of dotted line shows me that this is what's copied. If I wanted to copy all this, Control C, you can see that the dotted line gets bigger. If I want to paste that, I just go to wherever I want to paste it and Control V. Alternatively, you can click the button here, copy and paste. Works the same way. If I were to cut and paste, cut is Control X instead of Control C. Paste is still Control V. You can see it removes the data from the original cells and places it in the new cells. So I'm going to cut and paste them back here. In Excel, there's another way you can effectively cut and paste, which is you can drag data. The way you drag data is you select the green box that's highlighted around it. You see how my cursor turns into like 4 lines pointing in opposite directions. You can just click and drag. And that's effectively the same as cut and paste. It can mess up formulas if you do it that way. So I'd recommend most of the time cutting and pasting rather than doing it like that. But that also works if you're not messing up formulas. In formatting, there's lots of different formatting you can do in Excel. You can see the shortcuts to them all up here. You can change cell color. So it's called the fill color, like that. Or I could select this color. You can change the font color, like this. You can change the borders. So this one's a bottom border here. Let me remove the color. No fill is to get rid of the color. See this line here? I can make it a thicker line. That could do a box all the way around. So there's lots of different things you can do there. I'm now going to remove that. You can change the font to, various fonts. You can change the size, all the same word processing stuff. You can change how it's oriented in the box. So let me make this taller. Right now, you see how it's oriented on the bottom of the box. You could orient it on the top of the box or in the middle of the box, or you could orient it on the left side of the box. Oh, this isn't text, so it's not going to do that. Let me change that real fast. I will explain this bit later, but you can move it to the left of the box, the right of the box, the middle of the box, whatever you want. I'm gonna fix these here. Doing the auto size that I mentioned earlier. You can increase your indent, reduce your indent. You can wrap text, which is, so if I go like this, see this text, see how it's sticking out from the other side? If I had some other text here, it would cut off the end of this. But if I click wrap text, it just keeps it going in the box. It just wraps it around. Now, obviously, that's not very useful for a single word like this, but it could be for something like call center, which is 2 words. So I can still get the whole thing without having to make the box wider. Just undo. You can, this is a shortcut to merge and center. You can change the formatting of how the data is presented. I'll get to that in a second. There's also, so these are all the shortcuts for them. You can right click and go to format cells, and it brings up this box. Another way to get there is if you just click on these little boxes with an arrow, it gets you to the same place. And there's a bunch of different tabs for all the different things. So font here, that's these options. Alignment, that's these options. Border, that's these ones right here. So there's lots of different things you can do there. You can, so the data type is listed here. This is again the shortcut for it, but there's also more specific things here. Earlier, I said it didn't realign because it wasn't text. These are stored. That one's not. I guess they all are. They're custom right now. Usually I would have numbers like this stored as a number. These are shortcuts to commonly used formats. So if I use the comma here, it's the accounting format, which is the same as number, but it uses the commas. You can increase the number of decimal places or decrease them. You can do it as a percentage, as dollars, which is basically just accounting, but it gives you the dollar sign. You could change it to a date. I realize that that doesn't particularly make sense, but you can do math with dates in Excel because dates are really just a number on the back end. It's just a new format. And then you can do text. The problem with text is that you can't do math with text. So real quick, I can show you if this is a number and I add these together, it gives me an answer. If I change this to text, well, it's saving it. Actually, apparently it figured it out. That's a new feature. No, it didn't. Okay, so the reason it's showing me the formula is because it's trying to do math with a text box, which it can't do. So if I change this back to a number and then go back in here and hit enter, this is stored as text, then it can do the math again. So you don't want your numbers to be text. You can also hide and unhide numbers. Actually, before I move on, let me tell you about Format Painter. So Format Painter is like copy paste, except just of the formatting. So if I have this, which as you can see is a different format than this, but I want this to look like this, let's make it more obvious too. We'll make this yellow. So I want this to be yellow and without a decimal place. I can hit Format Painter, which is copy just the format, and then click here, and it copies the format without changing the data. You can also, you notice how it's not doing it anymore. It just copied it once. If you double click it, it keeps it on, and I can keep clicking on things to copy it. When I'm done, I hit escape, and it removes the Format Painter. You can hide and unhide cells. So if you only wanted to see, maybe I only want to see call center 1 data. So here's where call center 1 data ends. Could go all the way down. And I can hide this. And now it's still there. See, the row jumps from 31 to 152, but you can't see it because it's hidden. The hidden cells are identified by this sort of line right here in between the numbers. To unhide them, you highlight before and after, right click, unhide. Also, you may have noticed I selected a bunch of cells all at once. The way that you do that is with Shift or Control. So if I click on a cell, it just goes to that cell. But if I click on a cell while holding Shift, it selects the cell you are on and all the cells in between to the cell you click on next. So I'm holding Shift, I click, and it highlights all 3 of these cells. I hold Shift and I click, and it highlights all of these cells because they're all in between. Control, instead of highlighting all the cells in between, highlights each cell that you click when you're holding Control. So if I want to select this cell and this cell and this cell, I held Control, and now you can see all 3 of them are selected. Whereas if I had clicked on these while holding Shift, I end up selecting all the ones in between. You can also find, I'm going to change this here. You can find with Control F, and also over here, there's a find button. But Control F for find will bring up a find. If I want to find the word year 1, it'll do that. I can find the next one and the next one. I'm hitting enter, the next one and the next one, etc. You can also replace. So what if I wanted to find all instances of year one and replace them with the word beginning? I can find the next one and replace it, or I can replace all. So now every instance of the word or of the phrase year one has been replaced with the word beginning, which can be very helpful. But I'm going to change that back. Cut and paste works on these menus as well. So I've just replaced them back. You can also find a special or go to special. So I'm going to hide some cells real quick. Now, if I copy these cells, it's going to copy 2 through 15, including all the hidden cells. So copy, paste, or not. Apparently that's changed. There are certain instances where you would want to find only the visible cells, like in an outline, which I will be going over later. But the way you do that is when you have these cells selected, you can go to this find and select and go to special. And then you could say visible cells only. And now when I hit copy, it's only copying the visible cells, which we did previously, but in some cases it won't work that way. Different versions of Excel work differently. They often add new features, and so sometimes features change without me realizing it, and that's what happened there. You can insert rows. I'm going to unhide these. Oh, I also forgot to mention, when you copy and paste, if you copy, then you hit enter, it will paste it. So be careful if that's not what your intention is. If I had these copied and I was here and wanted to go to the next cell, I go, oh, okay, I actually want to copy it. I want to paste it here. If I hit enter, I'm going to get something I don't want. So just be aware that when you have something copied, enter will paste it rather than go down a cell. You can insert rows and delete rows and columns. So if I wanted to insert a row here in between, well, actually, let's do it here in between call center 1 and call center 2. I could right click. I still have rows selected, so I'm going to hit escape to uncopy them. Now right click and insert, and it puts a blank row. I can do the same thing with a column. Insert, blank column. If I wanted to insert a bunch of data like this, I could go copy and then insert copied cells. And not only does it insert rows, but it also puts the data you have copied there. Now, the way I did it was incorrect, and that's why you can see it going to infinity here. The reason that it's incorrect is that here I selected these cells and here I selected these rows, which is why it behaved that way. But if I selected like this and then like this and then inserted, it would ask me, hey, how do you want to shift the cells? And in this case, I want to shift them down. And so it does now what I was intending. If I had copied the rows like this, rather than just those cells, and then did the insert, it would work the way I intended, like that. So if you run into that, that's why. You can also delete rows in the same manner, highlight the rows you want to delete, and then right click and delete, and they go away. You can delete like this, and when I do this, it's going to ask me, do you want to move the cells up? So take these and go up, or move them left, just like that. You can change your zoom. For me, the easiest way to do that is if you hold Control on your keyboard, and then if you have a mouse with a mouse wheel like this, you can hold Control and then roll up on the mouse wheel and it will zoom in. Hold Control and roll down on the mouse wheel and it will zoom out. Additionally, under view, you can click this, which will just put you back to 100% zoom. So if I was zoomed way out, I click this button, it goes back to 100%. If I was zoomed way in, click this button, goes to 100%. I could click the zoom button and change the setting. I'll go to 200, or I could go to 31% if I wanted to be weird like that. You can also zoom into a selection of data. So maybe I really only care about this first client here. I could click zoom to selection and it will zoom in and fill the screen with just the data. All right, so we've gone through all of the basic movement functions. I realize that's not much about Excel. That's really just how do you get around Excel. If there are any questions at this point, now would be a good time before I move on to doing more things in Excel.
We have a hand up. Let me see who that is. Brandy, I'm going to allow you to talk, Brandy. Go ahead.
It shows Brandy is muted.
Yeah, I asked her to unmute.
Oh.
Or you can type it in the chat, Brandy, if you prefer to do that.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I may have missed it, but did you say a simple command to undo something? I saw you.
Yes. Control Z.
Okay.
Additionally, this button up here, later I'm going to talk about this menu, but by default, undo should be up at the top.
Is there a limit to what you can undo? Like, will it only let you do the last?
Good question. I believe the limit is the last time you saved.
Okay.
And sometimes it'll limit you. Generally, it's the last time you saved, I believe. Actually, we can test that. Save, Control S for save. No, so it's letting me do it through a save. If you close it, you can't undo it anymore. If you, I'm not entirely sure. I know that there are limits. I don't know what they are. I rarely run into them as an issue. But generally speaking, you can undo whatever you need.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So moving on to a few other things here. You can name variables, which I've done here. So right now, I have these boxes have names, right? B5, B7, D2 or D4. So it's right here. And that's the naming convention I mentioned. But you can change this name if you wanted. For example, I could say I want D3 to be called year 2. Nope, apparently I can't. Why isn't it working? Maybe I have to hit multiple things. Did this on my Excel at home, and apparently my settings are different here. Well, we'll do it the other way. So you can go to formulas. So this is called the ribbon. And within the ribbon, there's different, within each item in the ribbon, there's different selections. And then there's individual buttons within it. So I'm going to formulas on the ribbon and then defined names, which is this section of this ribbon, and then define a name. So I can call this name year 2, and I can tell it what it refers to. So you can type in what you want it to refer to, but I find it easier to just select the cells you want. So if you click this button here, it's now asking me, where do you want to refer to it? So I'm just going to highlight this and say, I want year 2 to mean this data right here. And I can click OK. What is going on? Sorry about this.
I think this is great because this is exactly what we go through as beginners. So way to go.
It doesn't, so I can do it again so you can see the error. It says the syntax of the name isn't correct. Syntax is basically grammar, but for a computer. So it's saying it doesn't like the way I've worded this. And it says verify the name, that it doesn't start with, or that it does start with a letter underscore, that it doesn't include a space or a character that isn't allowed, or it doesn't conflict with an existing name in the workbook. If you look at the name I used, I put year space 2. It doesn't want to accept a space. So I'm going to remove that space. And now it'll work. So I've just named all of this year 2. So watch what happens if I have these selected. Well, it's just telling me that where I start. But if I select all of these, you can see now I have the name. The reason naming things can be important is because in formulas, you can use named cells rather than, or cells that you have named specially. So if I wanted to add up all of the stuff in year 2, I could write a formula that adds up D4 through D9, or I could write a formula that just adds up year 2. So it's a shortcut when you're dealing with formulas. I don't generally need to use this naming convention often, but if you're going to be doing pretty significant formula work using a lot of the same cells, it can save you a lot of time to name a group of cells to use in formulas. And that might have been the issue I had earlier. Yeah, so earlier when I couldn't name one cell, it was the syntax error. So now I've just named this single cell year 3. I wouldn't generally want to do that, but I just did just to show you that I can. You can also go to this name manager up here and see all of the things you've named. So I don't actually like my year 3 name. I'm going to delete that. But before I do, I'm going to show you, it tells you exactly what it's talking about. See how this is highlighted here? It's saying this is what it refers to. So I'm going to delete this name because I don't actually want it. It's asking me, are you sure you want to delete it? And I will close it. So year 2 should be this one, right? So I'm going to go back to my name manager. I'm going to go to year 2. I'm going to click on it, and you can see it is in fact referring to that. It also tells you here what it's referring to, and it says the values that are included if you want to know all of those things from the name manager. Also, if you've defined a name when you're using formulas, I realize I haven't gotten to formulas yet, but when you're using formulas, it will start auto populating, just like when you type into Google and Google tries to guess what you're trying to type. Excel will do the same thing too with formulas and with named cells. So if I started a formula here, I could start typing year, and you can see right here on the list, it knows year 1 and year 2 are named cells. So that would be another reason why you might want to name your cells if you're going to use them a bunch. To get out of that, I hit escape. Escape is like cancel. I also wanted to point out these cells here. Generally speaking, at least in the accounting world, if you have a spreadsheet where you expect certain information to be filled in by the user, you generally want to change the color of those cells. That's how you indicate to the user that this is something you need to do. Generally speaking, the cell color that gets picked is one of these sort of pastel light colors, but I've seen yellow or orange be used as well. So I've colored these in because we're gonna, when we get to formulas, we're gonna fill these in. So before we actually get to formulas, I need to explain order of operations. So maybe in your middle school math, you learned about order of operations. Order of operations is in what order in a formula various items have to be completed. So the acronym is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or at least that's the one that I learned. For P is for parentheses, E is for exponent, M and D go together, which is for multiply and divide, and A and S go together, and it's for add and subtract. So if you have a complicated formula, let's say all formulas start with an equal sign, but let's say I want to do this plus this times this plus in parentheses, this minus this, close parentheses, to the, where's the caret, to the second power.
Brian, could you make the screen a little bigger?
Yep, sorry.
Here.
There we go. So I wrote a formula that said, I should have not done it that small. Hold on. So I did a formula that said add G5 and G4 together, multiply it by C6, add in parentheses D6 minus E6 to the second power. So how do you figure out what order that's going to go? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So first, it's going to do what's inside the parentheses. Then it's going to do the exponent. Then it's going to do any multiplication or division. So it's going to do this section next. And then it's going to do addition and subtraction. So it'll do this plus this product, and then also add this. So let me use easier numbers so it's easier to follow. I'm going to just replace these with numbers. 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 1. So maybe even on social media, you've seen these. What's the answer to this question? And we'll have something like this. So this is the answer. We do the parentheses first. So 3 minus 1, which is 2. Then you do the exponent next. So 2 to the second power is 4. Then you do the multiplication. So this section is 4. Do the multiplication, 3 times 5 is 15. And then you do the addition and subtraction. So 2 plus 15 is 17, plus 4 is 21. And there's 21. The reason that matters is when you are writing formulas, if you need to be able to use your tools to get to the answer you actually intend. Generally speaking, if you want something to happen in a particular order, put it inside parentheses and it'll work. So even if I didn't know my order of operations, if I wanted this to go first, I could put it inside parentheses. We're going to get the same answer because I just put it inside parentheses in the order it was already going to go. But you'll notice that if I change the parentheses, put them around here, I'm going to get a different answer. The reason I'm going to get a different answer is because now it's going to do 2 plus 3 before multiplying by 5. So we're going to still get 4 over here. And then we're going to get 5 times 5, which is 25, plus 4 is 29. So you got 29. So that's how you can use the parentheses to help with your stuff.
Server down?
It shouldn't be, but I'm teaching a class right now. In a formula, you have various arguments. So an argument is the computer term for an aspect of the formula. So if we type in the if formula, or if function, which I will be going over shortly, it tells you which arguments are required and which arguments are optional. So it's saying the first argument is a logical test. The second argument is the value of true. And the third argument is the value of false. Arguments are separated by a comma. If you don't have enough arguments, it will tell you so. Or if you have too many arguments, it'll tell you so. So if I just go 1, 1, 1, that's all the arguments it's looking for. If I do one more and hit enter, it says, oops, you've entered too many arguments. If I put not enough, so in this case 0, because it only has one required one, and I hit enter, it'll say, uh-oh, you didn't fill it out appropriately. All formulas start with an equal sign. That's what tells the system that that's what tells Excel that it's a formula. And and it starts with an open parenthesis and ends with a closed parenthesis. So if I type 3 plus 2 or 2 plus 3, it's just going to stay as 2 plus 3. because I didn't give it an equal sign, so it doesn't know it's a formula. If I give it an equal sign, it'll say, oh, that's 5. If I'm doing a function like sum, it has to do an open bracket. I could say 2 and 3. And then I close it and hit enter, and it's still 5, because what the sum function does is it adds things together. Let me see if I want to do functions now. So let's do the sum function now. So the sum function is a basic function that just adds values. Also, remember when I talked about autofill on your labeled cells, it will also autofill for formulas. So I started typing sum and it says, do you want sum if s, sum product, sums q, etc. So I want sum. I don't have to click on this, but if I do, it'll give me that open bracket. Because what I'm saying is I want that formula, and so it starts it for me. It's telling me the arguments that it needs. It needs a number, and then optionally another number, and then the ... means optionally continue. So I could say I want this number, comma, this number, comma, this number, and we'll add all 3 of those numbers together. I hit enter, but because I had a function going, it knew to put the end parenthesis on it. But older versions didn't always do that. And sometimes if you have a complicated formula, it'll yell at you about how you need a closing parenthesis. So alternatively, with sum, you can give it a range. So what I did is I gave it 3 arguments, this thing, and this thing. Oops. I could also say this thing to this thing. Notice it changes the, actually, let me do this so you can see it a little bigger. It didn't work. It has a colon here, which says a range. So I'm only using 1 argument, but the argument is a range of things. So I get the same answer, but I did it a little more simply. Alternatively, I could use that range and then add this thing, and then add this range, and then add this range. And it still works. In this case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 arguments, and 1, 2, 3 of them are a range, and 1 of them is a single cell. The single cell and range things works in a lot of different formulas, although not all of them. In some, it does. Additionally, because sum is so commonly used, there's an Autosum function. So I could type sum. Sorry, I should say, when I start typing sum and it's on the one that I want, I'm hitting tab to select that instead of clicking on it. So I could just go sum like this, and notice that this was a named function or a named group of cells. So instead of saying range C4 through C9, it said year 1, because I've named C4 through C9 year 1. So this would be an example of where you might want to name a range of cells. Over here, though, it's not named, so I could type that sum, grab these, close parenthesis. There is, however, an easier way. You can click Autosum. Autosum guesses at what you're trying to sum. So if I click this, it says, did you want to sum these? Turns out I did. So I can hit enter and it solves it there. So I can do it in a single click rather than having to type it out. The way Autosum works is it looks directly above the cell you're in first to see if there's any values. If there's not, like here, if I hit Autosum, it won't know what to do. Oh, it did know what to do. If I hit Autosum here, okay, it knew what to do. It's smarter than it used to be. If I hit Autosum here, it doesn't know what to do because there's no values above it. So then it checks values to the left. Well, there's no values to the left either. So it doesn't know what to do. So the Autosum function is not particularly useful, but it does put in the sum, and then I could say I want to sum these. If there's both, it's still checking up first. So if I do it here, it's going to Autosum these rather than these, like that. It also, let's see if it Yeah. It also checks for a change in information. So when I Autosum here, it's only getting this number instead of these, because this is a formula and it's a separate formula from this. These were not formulas, they were individual values. So it knew you wanted to sum all of those. But if I go like this, and then I Autosum, it's grabbing these because they're individual values. It stops at the formula. So I'm going to delete all these values and actually fill these in. Remember how I said the highlighted cells generally means that we're looking for you to input data there. So I can go here and I can go Autosum, and go here and go Autosum, and here and Autosum, Autosum, and Autosum. Now this one isn't going to know what I want to do when I Autosum, because what I want is these. If this cell were here, it would figure that out, but it's not. So when I click Autosum, it goes, oh, did you want this cell above it? But no, I don't. I want these cells. You can also, I'm going to get to that later. So you can, I can talk about so you can show formulas. So right now, it's just showing me the values, right? If I click here, I can see the formula here, but it's not showing me that by default. You can tell it by default to show you the formulas rather than the values. The way you do that is you go up to formulas and then formula auditing, that's here, and show formulas. So now, let me zoom out a bit. You can see the formulas rather than the values. If I want to turn that off, I just click the show formulas button again. Sometimes that's useful to find out when you're trying to audit your spreadsheet, figure out why things aren't working the way that you want them to. All right, so the quick access toolbar, which I've mentioned several times here, is this up here. Right now, and I think this is true by default, I have save, undo, redo. If you want to change what's up there, you can click this little arrow. And all of these are different things that I could put up there. For example, I could have open as a hotkey or a quick access icon. So there's the new one. If I want to remove it, I just click on it again. You can also change the order, and there are more options than these. There's a lot of options. These are just the ones that are most often used, so they're on the menu here. But if you go to show more command or more commands, it brings up a whole bunch of different options that you can select, and you can move them around. So if I wanted redo to be before undo, I could click this button and move it up on the list. Then I click OK, and you'll see these are going to switch. Boop, just like that. I don't believe undo works here. Yeah. So when you're undoing, you're only undoing things you did to your spreadsheet, not things you did to your menus. So I'm going to go to more commands, and I'm going to move redo back down. But I could add, any of these items if I wanted. You would add them like this, or you would remove them like that. Okay. The status bar, and I use this a lot. This was a more recent addition. I started using Excel before it had all these options, but I like the options that are on there now. So it's this down here. The status bar by default has, so remember I had zoomed. It tells me what zoom I'm at right now, 190. I could type in a different number. I could just click this minus to zoom out. And now I'm holding control and using the mouse wheel. It shows you different views. So it's actually better on here. If I click on the page break view, it shows me how it's going to print. So this is going to print onto one page, and this is going to print on to the next page down to here. That's what the dotted line means. Oops, I hold control instead of shift. Page layout view, which is showing you essentially the same thing, but instead of trying to show it to you all at once, it's just showing, you know, if I can start working here, this is going to be on this page, this is going to be on this page, etc. And then grid view, which is just, here's all your data. What I find most useful though, which you can't see yet, is when you highlight multiple cells with values in them. So I'm going to highlight these. Down here, it shows me the average of those cells, how many cells I just selected, 12, and the sum of those cells. So a lot of times when I'm trying to find out what, say I wanted to know all of client A, I could insert a row and then do an Autosum and go, oh, it's 8,026. But if I just need to know the number, I don't need it on the spreadsheet, I could just highlight them and go, oh, it's 8,026. So I find this very useful. You can also customize this by right-clicking and changing what's on there. So you can see average is on there, count is on there, sum is on there. You could also get minimum or maximum. There's the zoom items. You could have it show you if caps lock is on or off, if num lock is on or off. So there's a bunch of things. You can just put whatever you find useful down there. We're almost to a part where I'm going to start working with numbers. So referencing. Referencing in Excel is like this. This is referencing E4 through E9. I'm not going to get to there yet. You could, if you wanted, so remember how I clicked Autosum on each of these? If I delete those, I'm going to delete these two. Actually, I'm going to Autosum here. Delete this one. Maybe I don't want to have to click Autosum each time, because what I'm doing is I want this formula, but I want it for all of these, right? I just want it to be, this is the G items, and then I want this one to be the F items, and this one to be the E items, etc. So there's a shortcut. So remember I talked about that fill box earlier. If you drag this fill box backwards, it didn't work. Interesting. Oh, because I changed a setting for the next part of the class. I need to change that back. I'll explain that menu at another time when we get to section 2. So let me do that again for you. So I'm going to use this fill box and I'm going to drag it back. And it knows that here I wanted G, here I wanted F, here I wanted E. That's called variable referencing. The reference is G4 through G9. When I dragged it one to the left, it dragged the whole reference one to the left. So I dragged this one to the left. And so it went, well, we were all these G cells. So when you drag one to the left, you want all these F cells. You can see that right there. It's a very useful tool to use in Excel. But maybe you don't want that to happen. Maybe what you want is so if I drag this right now, if I drag this down, it's going to move this reference to here. And I'm going to have a sum of 0 because there's no data in there. See, like that. By the way, when you drag a cell, you get all the formatting with it because it's just a copy and paste. So that's not what I wanted to do. So what I could do instead is use absolute referencing. So an absolute reference says when I drag this, or by the way, copy and paste works the same way. So I dragged this, but remember dragging is just copy and paste. So if I go copy and paste, it still updates that reference. So, and the reason, by the way, I did it backwards is because these ones, if I Autosum here, it's using this named reference instead of cell references. So if I drag it, it's going to treat it like an absolute reference. So when I drag this, you're going to see the same answer here. And you're going to see the same answer in all of them. It's because naming cells works like absolute referencing. So absolute referencing says when you drag the cell or copy and paste it somewhere, do not update the reference. The way that's signified is with $signs. So there's a shortcut, which is F4. Unfortunately, I can't zoom in on this bar. So I can't make this bigger. I can make this bigger, but what we're looking at is up here. So if I select this G4 here and I hit F4, see what puts these dollar signs? And hit F4 again, change it to just that one, F4 again, just to that one, F4 again, goes back to variable. That's cycling through the various kinds of absolute referencing. So what the dollar sign means is this portion of it is an absolute reference. So right now, the whole number is an absolute reference. G9 is not, but G4 is. So if I select G9 and hit F4, now they both are. And so if I drag this, all of them are going to change to 27,419. And the reason is because I used absolute reference. So when I dragged it, it didn't update those columns at all. Where you might want to use that is something like this. Maybe I want the total multiple times. Realistically, you wouldn't, but because we're on this sheet, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to F4 this and F4 this. Whoops. I clicked on another cell rather than hitting enter first. And so that it thought that I was saying, hey, I want you to change the reference. So I'm going to hit enter. Now I'm going to drag this down and you'll see it doesn't change. I can also drag it to the right and it doesn't change. Now, maybe you don't want it to change going down, but you do want it to change going right. If that were the case, you would make the letter, because when you're going right, the letter is what's changing. You would make the letter not absolute. You can cycle through it with F4, or you can manually do it by adding the dollar sign or deleting the dollar sign. So I'm just deleting the dollar sign here. So now when I drag down, it's still absolute, but when I drag to the right, it's not. So this one is C10 through G10. This one is D10 through H10. See how it moved it over one? This one moves over another one, E10 through I10. And that's because I only have the number rather than the letter absolute referenced. You could do it the other way as well. So I'm going to delete all those. Deleting it this way because I also want the coloring to go away. If I just hit the delete button, it just removes what's inside. And then I would also have to click this. You can also do what's called 3D referencing. So in all of the referencing that I showed you here, I was referencing information on the same worksheet. By the way, a worksheet is a tab within a workbook, which is a file. So this whole file is a workbook, and each one of these tabs is a different worksheet. So all of the referencing I did so far is a worksheet referencing within the same worksheet. But I can reference to another worksheet, and when I do that, that's called 3D referencing. So if we look at one of these, if we look at this one is referencing the other sheets. So see how it says in apostrophes or half quotation marks, call center 1, and then exclamation mark B13. What it's saying is on the tab call center 1, pull B13. You can do that by just going like this, equals, go to call center 1, B13. And then there you go, and you hit enter, and now it's there. That's called a 3D reference. It works exactly the same as regular referencing. Again, I could make this absolute with F4 or not, but it's referencing a different worksheet. Sometimes you might want to look at multiple views in the same workbook at the same time. So maybe I don't have this information in. I could go up to view and then new window, window, this section here, and then new window. What that will do is it'll open up another version of this same workbook. If I drag this around, here's the other one right behind it. You can also tell, I can't see it because my controls are up there, but see how it says Excel training 1.xlx2, and this one says 1. That means I have two versions of it up right now. Oops, wrong workbook. Additionally, you can arrange all the windows. So I have these other trainings for the later sections up right now. So when I arrange them all, it's going to see 4 windows. So I'm going to go back to view. I'm going to arrange all, and you can tell it various ways, but I'm going to do tiled here. And so what it's just done is it's gone, here's one, and here's one. It apparently didn't have enough space for all 4 because I have 4 up. It should have given me 4. So let me arrange all horizontal. I'm not sure why it's only seeing 3 of them. I can also, let's see, I can go view side by side, and then it'll show me, oh, I see, because I closed the second window of this one. View side by side, here's 1 and 3. What do I have selected right now? I must have 2 selected. So if I want 1, click OK. Now I'm viewing them side by side. Right now, synchronous scrolling is on. So if I scroll on 1, it scrolls on both. That can be useful when you have data side by side and you're trying to compare it. Taking longer than I expected, so I'm going to speed through a little bit here. I'm going to close some of these extra windows that I've got. Whoops. I was apparently sharing just that window. So when I closed it, it closed the whole thing. So I'm not actually going to fill that in. I'm just going to undo the delete. Oh, so I am, because I've closed some windows, it's not letting me undo the delete. So I'm going to do this. That actually didn't do what I wanted. Call center to you. So what I'm doing here is 3D referencing. And I'm just grabbing the cells that I want it to equal. On the wrong. There we go. Okay.
Brian, we have a quick question. How did you undo the arrange?
How did I undo the arranged windows? I just closed the extra windows.
Okay, thanks.
You can also make it bigger. So it was small like this. So I hit the little box to make the one window I cared about bigger. I'm actually sharing just this window, so I'm not sure if you're seeing when I make it smaller. Did the window just get smaller for you all?
Yes.
Okay. There's a function wizard up here. So when we're talking about functions, you can click this little FX button and I want a blank one. And it gives you a list of commonly used functions, but you can start typing stuff like add values together and it'll find what it thinks are functions you might want. Concatenate, RTD, product, sum. Sum was the one I was looking for, so it found it, etc. Besides sum, what I find is the most useful function is the if function. So I'm going to go over to this. We're almost at the end of section 1, so I'll take questions on that pretty soon here, so get them ready. If, which I mentioned earlier but didn't talk about, is a logical test. Basically what it's doing is it's setting up an if then. So the first argument here is a logical test. That is something like something is greater than something, or something equals something, or add these numbers together, or whatever. So you find a logical test which will return true or false. If you return true, then it returns whatever the second argument is. And if it returns false, it returns whatever the other argument is. So let's say I wanted to know if this value was 1,000. So I could say if this equals 1,000. If I just end it there, I'm going to get false. Doesn't like it because it doesn't like the equal sign. All right, how about if it's less than 1,000? No, why doesn't it like it? I'm not sure why it doesn't like it. Okay, it didn't like that I only used the one argument. I'm not sure why, because they're supposed to be optional. But what happened here is I did a logical test. If this value is less than 1, then if that's true, do this. If it's false, do this. So let's say if it's less than 1, I want it to return 800. I don't know why I'd want that, but just for demonstration purposes. If it is not less than 1, then I want it to return 7. If I hit enter, we get 7 because it was a false statement. If I change this to say 1,500, well, now it is less than 1,500, right? So I should get true. And in this case, true is 800. And there you go, I get 800. You can also nest an if statement. You can nest lots of functions, but nested if statements are something that I use regularly. So a nested if statement is an if statement within another if statement. So what if I wanted to say a series of things? I care if the number is less than 1,000 or if it's less than 2,000. I could say equals if this is less than 1,000. If that's true, I want to return true. If you want to return text, you just put it in quotes like that. If that's not true, if I just put false here and end the statement, we'll get false. But I want to check for two things. I want to check if it's less than 1,000. And if it's not, I want to check if it's less than 2,000. So if it's true, it's still true. But if it's false, I want to do another test. This is where I nest my if statement. I can type if again. I don't need the equal sign now because I'm inside another function. You only need the equal sign at the beginning. So if D2 is less than 2,000, then we'll say big, or medium. Otherwise, big. And so it's greater than 1,000, so we get a false here, so it goes into the next test, but it's less than 2,000, so we should get a medium answer. Oh, also, I don't have enough parentheses. So here it color codes it. It may be hard to see on the screen, but these parentheses are red. It's trying to say these parentheses go together, but I didn't close this parenthesis. So I need one more at the end there. See the black one with the black one? Now it's complete. And we got a medium like expected. If I put in a bigger number, 3,000, now it updates to big. If I put in 900, then we get true. Or sorry, 900, we get true. Because now it was true before it fell into the nested if. I find sum and if to be the functions that I use most often in my line of work. So we're gonna value and delete that. Conditional formatting. Another really useful tool is conditional formatting. So we talked earlier about how you can format things. I could make these yellow, for example. But what if I only want to format certain cells? For example, what if I want to highlight all the cells greater than 2,000? You can go to conditional formatting, which is under Home, styles, conditional formatting right there. And I can set a highlight cells rule. Greater than, what did I say, 2000? And I can change what I want here. I can give it a custom format or whatever. Usually I just let it default to this light red fill with dark red text. And so now notice that in the section that I highlighted, all the values that are 2000 or greater got highlighted, and all the ones that weren't didn't. This can be really useful when you want to pop things out. So I can add that to the whole thing. The trick is text doesn't always work the way you want, but that's okay. And then you could sort based on the color of the cell and get all of the bigger values to the top. I'm going to talk about sorting in the next section, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. When you are interested in taking your Excel sheet and putting it in a printed format, either paper or a PDF document or something, you can go to File, Print right here. Alternatively, you can do Control P for print. It will show you a preview of what it's going to print. You can scroll through this and see how it's printing. You could change the orientation. Maybe I want to make this landscape. Do it like that. You could tell it to fit to a certain number of pages. Maybe I want it to only be 1 page tall. It's already only 1 page wide, but 1 page tall. To do that, it's going to have to shrink it a lot. So watch what happens when I click OK here. It shrinks, so now it fits on 1 page. You can change a whole bunch of different things. You can adjust it to a specific size. I'm going to get back to 100. You can change your margins, your header, footer. You can add grid lines, various things. I won't go through them, but this is where all your printing options are. You can also change what you're printing to. So I could print to my printer, could print to a PDF, whatever. All right, that is the end of section 1. Actually, I skipped the outline. Sorry, not the end of section 1. A couple other things. Sorting is a very useful item for using in Excel. It's one of the main reasons to use Excel, I think. What sorting will do is it will sort data based on the inputs that you tell it. So you can highlight your data, you can right click, you can click on data and sort. You can also put sorting ascending or descending as one of your quick options here. But if I click sort, I can sort by call center. I could sort by client. I could sort by year. I could sort by volume. So let's do call center. I can sort by cell values. I can sort by cell color, font color, whatever. And I can sort ascending or descending. In this case, because it recognizes it as text, it'll say A to Z rather than smallest to largest. But if I sorted it by volume, it says smallest to largest. I can also uncheck this, my data has headers, and then it will include the top row as part of the sort. And because there's no header anymore, it just says column D. When I put it back, now it's volume. So I'm going to sort by call center. Nope, it's already sorted by call center. I'm going to sort by client. And what we're going to see is right now it's sorted by call center 1, call center 2, it goes on, and then client A, B, C, D, E, F, A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. But if I sort by client, all of the A's will go together like that. So now you can see all the A's, but there's call center 1, call center 2, call center 3, etc. I'm going to undo that sort. You can sort by basically anything, including, as I mentioned earlier, that conditional formatting. So if I go conditional format, let's just highlight the top 10 items. Well, we can't see them right now, but if I sort by volume, by cell color, I want this red color on top, there's my top 10 values right there. The other thing that you can do here that where sorting really matters, so I just undid a couple of times, so we're back to the way it was, is outlines, specifically subtotals. I won't go through outlines in general, but I will go through subtotals. So a subtotal is, I have a lot of data here, and it's kind of hard to read, right? It's all the same data that's in these. So here's the call center 1 data. This is a lot easier to read. But if you didn't have this data in a nice table and you had it in a list like this, you might want to make it easier to read with subtotals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the things I want to subtotal, and under data outline subtotal, I can click this button, and it says at each change in call center, so that's this row, use the sum function, but I could also do count, average, max, etc. on this particular item volume. If I click OK here, creates this outline. And you can see at the end of call center 1, because it's changing, it summed all of call center 1. With an outline, you can shrink or grow things quickly. So if I click on this 2 here, if I click on this minus, it will shrink that call center 1 total, plus we'll grow it again. If I click on 2, it will change them all to the same. So I shrunk them all. Now, if we look, call center 1 total 105, call center 1 total 105. So if you had the data in a list like this, you might want to use this subtotal function rather than spend a bunch of time putting it in tables like this. Okay, now we're at the end of section 1. Are there any questions? I'll just pick a couple items for section 2 since we're running a little low on time.
We haven't had any new questions. You guys are all hanging in there. You're doing great.
All right. Well, let's move to section 2.
Yes, there will be an access to a recording. I'll email the link to you guys.
Because I've made changes to this workbook and I haven't saved them yet, when I close it, it tries to tell me, hey, do you want to save your changes? In this case, I'm not going to save them. So now I'm going to share number 2. All right. So if you do your formulas in certain ways, you'll run into errors. You can see some of them here. This # value, # name, # ref. There's an error checking feature that's automatic that you can turn off or on or change what it checks. So if you look, let me zoom in here. Some of these cells have this little green triangle. The green triangle says Excel recognizes that there's an error in this cell, or at least it thinks that there is. So if you click on it, it brings up this little exclamation mark thing. You click there and it tells you what it thinks. There's an error in value. Well, we can see that because it says # value. But this one also thinks there's an error. What does it think? Oh, it says there's an inconsistent formula. So that might not be an error, but we've told Excel that inconsistent formula is an error. So if you look, it's saying add these up, but the ones next to it are saying add these up. So Excel says, hey, you know, this is in between these two other things, but you're using a different formula. That might be an error. All of these say error because they're unprotected formulas. You can protect your sheet. Well, if I get to it, we'll talk about it. But the short version is you can protect a spreadsheet so that when you send it to someone, they can't change items. These particular cells haven't been protected, which is why it's telling me that this is an unprotected formula. So someone could go in and change that formula after you've sent it to them. So the error checking feature is in File, Options, Formulas. And so remember earlier how I said it wasn't updating and I said it was because I had changed something? That was up here. So right now it's set to automatic. Whenever I put in a new value, any formulas that rely on that automatically update. When I change it to manual, it doesn't update until I hit the recalc button, which is F9, which it says in that square kind of in the middle of the screen there. So I'm going to change it to manual to make it easier to follow. So this formula is summing these, right? But if I change this, see how this didn't update? It doesn't update till I hit F9. And now it's updated. Some people find that useful. Generally speaking, I don't, but that's how you turn that on. So I just undid that change and I'm going to hit F9 to recalculate. I'm going to leave it on so that when I make changes, they're easier to follow. They don't change automatically. So if I go back to those options, down here are all the error checking rules. So remember the one that said it was an inconsistent formula? Right here. Formula is inconsistent with other formulas in the region. If I turned that off, clicked OK, it's no longer warning me about, sorry, I probably have to hit F9. Why is it still warning me? Oh, because there's another error in the cell. But notice how it's not saying that it's an inconsistent formula anymore. Go back there. And turn that back on. So there's a whole bunch of different ones. If there are certain errors that come up often that you don't actually think are errors, you can turn those off. Okay, trace precedence. Sometimes you're having trouble with the formula and you want to know what it's calculating from. So if you go to formulas, formula auditing, trace precedence and dependence, it will do little arrows to show you what this is calculating from or what is calculating from this. So this cell is the sum of the cells above it, right? So the cells above it here are its precedence. So if I click that button, it gives me these little arrows that show me that these are its precedence. You can also remove the arrows and they go away. If I click here and trace precedence, it doesn't have any because it's a hard-coded value. And so it tells me so. But if I click trace dependence, it tells me that this cell is calculating using that cell, and so is this cell. So you can see how a cell is being used before changing it. Let me go ahead and remove those arrows. If you're referencing another worksheet or workbook, actually, if I say this equals this, and I do trace precedence, it gives me this little icon which says the precedents are on another workbook. The error checking, which I talked about earlier, it's essentially spell check, but for Excel. And there's an easy way to watch how things are changing with the watch window. So if I go to formulas, formula auditing, watch window, brings up this little window and I can tell it various things to watch. So maybe I want to watch this cell. So I click this add watch button and it tells me what it's referencing. I could change it. Maybe I actually wanted this cell. And I click add. And now, if I make this a bit bigger, it tells me what workbook it's on, what sheet it's on, the name of it, if it had a name. In this case, I haven't named the cell, so there's no name. The cell, actual cell. So if I had named it, say, employee expenses year 2, it would say that here, but then it would say C10 is the cell number. It tells me the value in that cell number, which is 3000 because it's this cell. And if there's any formula there, it would tell me that. So maybe I want to watch this. So it tells me that cell too. It's not very useful on a small workbook like this, but if you have a very large workbook or a workbook with multiple worksheets and you want to know what's happening when you change values, that's when you might use this watch window.
Brian, we have a question about that. Do workbooks that it refers to have to be open?
I'm sorry? Oh, the workbooks that, yes, the workbooks have to be open, which I guess means the worksheets are open. So yes, you can use a 3D reference, yes to the watch window. You can use a 3D reference to another workbook, and that workbook doesn't have to be open However, it won't update until you open it. So if you reference a workbook and then a different workbook, close the one you're referencing from, and then change the other one, the first one won't update because it's not open when you change the value. So be very careful when referencing other workbooks. Generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend it. You should probably be referencing within the workbook, but across worksheets is fine. You can also run into circular references. So a circular reference is when you do something in a cell that has to calculate based on the cell that you're doing it in. So for example, this is summing these cells right here. But if I change this to 14, it's now referencing the cell, including the cell I'm doing the math in. So when I hit enter and F9, because I don't have it on automatic calculation right now, it says, whoops, you have a circular reference. You need to remove that. So then I can fix this, hit my F9 calculate, and now I don't have that issue. So if you ever get anything about a circular reference, it's because the math you did is referencing itself. It doesn't have to be directly referencing itself either. So if I had another cell, let's see. So if I did equals this plus this, and then here in my sum, I added this, I get a circular reference, because even though this isn't directly circular referencing, it is referencing this cell, which references this cell. So it's still a circular reference. Let's see, I think I'll skip error checking. Okay, so what some of these mean here is this hashtag value. The problem is that this formula is trying to do math with text. So remember earlier when I said you can't do that? Well, that's what we're getting here. I'm telling it take 75,000 and subtract operating income. Well, operating income is words, so you can't do math with that. And so instead it gives me this value error. This name error is because I'm trying to do math with something else that has the name error. If I go to this one, I said equals SM C10 through C13. What I meant to do was sum, but SM is not a function. So what it's saying is, hey, you're trying to use a function, but you didn't use a name of a function that exists. That's why you get this name error. This ref error, I'm going to create a ref error here. So this is saying this minus this, right? But if I delete this, let's just delete all of these. This is not on auto calculate. If I delete these and then hit F9 to calculate, I get a hashtag ref. The reason I get that is because now it was saying this minus this, but this cell, I just deleted this cell, not deleted the contents, but actually deleted the whole cell. So now it doesn't know what it's referencing. That's what the hashtag ref means. So in this case, oh, I have to recalculate. In this case, it's trying to do math with a hashtag ref. So that's why we get that. And this one was trying to do math with something that disappeared. So that's why we're getting that. This one is trying to do math with one with the name. So hashtag value is when you try to do math with something that's not a number. Hashtag name is when you try to use a function that doesn't exist, like if you misspelled it. And hashtag ref is when you try to do math or a formula with a cell reference that goes with a reference to a cell that goes away. In your formula auditing, you have step in and step out. It helps you in figuring out what's going on in your formula. So if I said equals if this is greater than 100, then also check if this is greater than 1,000, then also check if it's greater than 100,000. So I just did 3 nested ifs. So if it's greater than 100,000, then I want this to be true. And, or let's say big. And if it's not greater than 100,000, I missed a 0, 100,000, there we go. If it's not greater than 100,000, then check to see if it's greater than 1,000. Sorry, this needs to say medium. And big. Okay, so this one says, if you're greater than 100,000, I have this backwards. If you're greater than 100,000, you're big. If you're not, you're medium. And then I close that, so this if statement is closed. Now I'm on the false for this one. So if you're greater than 1,000, check if you're greater than 100,000. But if you're not greater than 1,000, then you're small. And then close that one. And then one more, if you're not greater than 100, you're tiny. So we're getting medium. If I change this to 1, we'd get, and recalculate, we get tiny. If I change this to 100 and recalculate, sorry, 101, we get small. If we change this to 1,500, and we get medium. We change it to 105,000. We get big. So it works the way I expected, but maybe it's not working the way you expected. You could step into the formula. So you go to location, formula auditing, evaluate formula. So here's that formula that we're looking at. You can click evaluate or step in. Evaluate will just give you the value. So if F10, if I click evaluate, it'll tell me what F10 is, 105,000. So if 105,000 is greater than 100, evaluate, that's true, then keep going. If I step in, it jumps down here. And so we're still looking at 100,000. It's telling me this 105 before filling it in. When I step back out, it evaluates it. Step in, it's telling me I'm still talking about 105. Step out, it evaluates it, and then click evaluate. So if you're having trouble with a complicated formula, you can use this to check your formula to see how you get there. I've used it on several occasions with very complicated formulas. The split bar is, so in older versions, there was actually a bar you can drag. I don't believe that there is anymore, but you can insert it. So if you go view, split here. So if I go like this, what's going to happen is I'm going to split this into 2. So I click split, and now it functions as 2 separate windows. It's the same data, but I could scroll down here without scrolling down here, or I could scroll down here or up without scrolling on the other one. That can be useful if you're trying to look at 2 selections of data at a time within the same worksheet. If you want this to go away, you can double click it, or you can just click the split button again. You can also split vertically like that. The other useful way to do this is freeze. So you could split this like this, and that way, if you had a whole bunch of data, you could just keep scrolling and see that your year's up there. But you might click up here by accident and then scroll up there, and that can be frustrating. So in that case, you might want to freeze it instead. So what you can do is highlight these cells, hit freeze panes, and you can freeze just the top row or the first column or wherever you are. So I'm going to freeze right there. Now, when I scroll, oh, I froze in the wrong spot. So I'm going to unfreeze. I'm going to do it right here because it's freezing above where I've selected. So now when I scroll, it doesn't move those. So it works similarly to split, except that these are not 2 windows. They function like 2 windows, but I can't to do when he's scrolling in this window. So it functions more the way that I want. So generally speaking, I use split over freeze, but whatever works for you is fine. Oh, and also with the split bar, I forgot to mention, you can drag it to a new location. So if you wanted it over here, I could just take this and I could drag it to right there. And now it's split there. You can also protect your workbook. And I think this is the last thing I'm going to go through here. So if I want to protect my workbook, I can go to Review, Changes, Protect Sheet, or Home, Cells, Format, Protect Sheet. So what Protect Sheet will do is it will lock, well, it tells you the various things you can do. Generally speaking, what you want to do is lock cells or hide formulas in cells. When you lock it, you can give it a password to unlock it or to unprotect it. There is no recover your password in this. So if you set a password to lock it or to open it, because you can also set a password just to open the file, and you forget the password, you're stuck. You can't ever unlock it again. So be careful about that. A locked cell, let's see, so if I go location, home, cells, format, cells, format, lock cell. I've now locked this cell. So when I protect the sheet, you won't be able to change this cell. You wouldn't generally do that with a blank cell, but you could lock these cells, for example. And earlier we talked about this error message that says cell contains a formula that's not locked. This cell has not been locked, but when I go lock cell, that error goes away because now it is locked. So if I go protect sheet, it's saying, what can you do? The user can select locked cells or select unlocked cells. You can, but it won't allow them to format cells, insert columns, rows, etc. So if I click OK here, and now I try to change this, it won't let me because it's locked. But remember, this one wasn't, so I can change that one. So that's the reason you might want to lock or unlock, especially if you're sending the report to someone else. You can also build a worksheet that has the colored cells that indicate people are supposed to fill this in, and then lock all the rest of the cells so that nobody can mess with the rest of your formulas. You can also select hidden, which is under, clearly I do this a lot, format cells, right click the cell, format, oh, I have to unlock the sheet first. There we go. Format cells, protection. You can lock it or hide it. So if I hide it here, click OK, and then I protect the sheet. Look up here, you can see the formula. I protect the sheet. Now you can't see the formula. So you can still see the value, but you can't see how we calculated that value. So if you want to hide your formulas for some reason, that's the way you would do it. Unprotect the sheet here. All right, I think that's all I'm going to go through. Are there any questions about anything? It can be what we covered specifically, or if you have general Excel questions, I can answer them now. We have, Barbara, how long do you need at the end? 5 minutes, you said? Okay, so we have 15 minutes, sorry, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I was right the first time. We have 15 minutes for questions. So any Excel questions you have at all, I'd be happy to answer now.
I bet we have people with their heads just spinning. We learned a lot tonight.
We sure did.
How do I format multiple sheets?
I forgot to go over that. Thank you. That was in my list and I skipped it. So
Janice
you
had some
can-
great questions tonight.
yeah, I'm going to open the Excel training one again here and share it. So you can, it doesn't just have to be formatting. You can also do this with formulas. So I have this call center 1, call center 2, call center 3. They're all summing these, but maybe I want to get rid of these totals for some reason. You can select a tab and then in the same way Shift and Control work in the cells, they also work on the tabs. So I'm going to shift and click on call center 5. And that now I have all of them selected. See how they're all highlighted? Also, see how it says group at the top here? That means you have selected a group of tabs. If I delete this, what's going to happen is I'm going to delete the values in B13 through G13 on all of the 5 of these tabs. So if I hit enter, and now I click on one of these tabs, you can see they're all empty. Formatting works the same way. So if I'm expecting people to fill these in, maybe I want to give it a color, like this color. Now you can see they're all filled in that way. So that works for all formatting, all formulas. I could also select them all and do this Autosum. So now, right, I've auto-summed all the ones above and I did them all at the same time. And it's done that on every single one of these sheets. If I need to remove the group, so I'm not grouped anymore, you can click on a new tab and then now they're not grouped anymore. Any other questions? You're muted.
We had a thank you, great class. I don't think we have any more questions. So I wanted to say thank you so much, Brian. Such a great class and really basic for people who really wanted to get the beginning of how to use Excel. So thank you. For those of you who want to learn more, if you want to use Excel specifically for your business, or you just want to know more about it and you want to work with Brian, you can do that free of charge through MCSC. I think most of you already have worked with us, so it's nice to see you all back. I did want to show you what we have coming up. We have a whole series on money coming up. So we're going to talk about a credit report, what it is, what it means, and how you can make yours better. That's on the 25th. And that matters if you need to get a loan for your business or rent a location, your credit report matters. And then on the 12th of November, we have How Money Works. That's a 2-part series, and that's about making your money work for you for the short term and the long term. So I want to thank you all so much for coming. Have a great dinner. Have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Take care, everyone.